Hey there everybody, Joe here, and welcome to part 2 of the fundamentals of landscape painting. You now have a special ability if you completed the exercise in part 1. And that ability is to take any color and make it look like it's disappearing into any color of atmosphere. I mean, think about how cool that is. You simply mix that color of the object with the color of the sky and then add the amount of magenta or violet and some white to that mix of colors. Bam! You got the color that you need to create all of this natural looking depth and atmosphere. So now let's add knowledge about perspective to that. When you look at something in the world around you, there are consistent patterns that we can take and apply to whatever we're imagining to make them look much more believable when we go to put them on the canvas. So stick with me through part 2 and we'll get to learning about perspective. Just like every landscape painting has atmosphere, every landscape painting also has perspective. And I would say just about every painting that you want to look three-dimensional has perspective. Perspective can really make or break a picture, and I have to be mindful of it in everything that I paint, because if you're human, then you'll notice perspective. It's the way we survive our everyday lives in the natural world. Our spatial awareness is defined by the perspective that we see, and so it's no surprise that in a painting, the painting is going to be defined by how I do the perspective, and it will definitely be noticed. You don't have to pay attention to perspective. Of course, we have the freedom to paint what we want as artists. I'm just saying that it doesn't go unnoticed, and it's one of the most defining things about a picture is how the perspective is done. On the first exercise, we just did a solid blue sky, so now I'll make it a little bit more complex and actually paint a very simple landscape. Okay, now just like the last exercise that I did, I recommend painting on a surface that you consider disposable. I need the assurance that it's not going to be saved in order to do my best learning, because I need the freedom to redo it and ruin it. I need the freedom to produce garbage, as I said in the last video. At the top, I want blue, and so I'll put that right there. I don't need a lot of blue because I want this fading into something more morning or evening colored, so an orange right there. So I'll put red and yellow down here. Usually I put heavy amounts of paint on and then I blend it after it's on the canvas. So I thinned this out as I was talking. That might cause it to dry too fast. I get asked a lot how I blend it, how I have time to blend it, and the answer is that I work fast because it is fast drying water-based paint. I just need some shade of orange, and I'm going to overlap it with the horizon. So I'll put my bright orange down here and then work it upwards. Let's put a few blobs of white on here. I added some water and some extender to my white to make it a little bit quicker to apply. It doesn't really make it dry so much slower adding extender, but it does make it quicker to work with if I'm working on a large surface, and so that's helpful because I can get the job done faster before it dries. It does slow down the dry time, just in my experience not extremely. So what I'm going to do now is blend my orange into my blue. I want a really light orange, and then I want it to fade into the blue gradually. But what I already know is going to happen is when this blue meets this orange, it's going to start turning green. And I don't want green, especially not a green strip across my sky where these two colors mix. So what do? I add violet. I'm going to go ahead and add my red violet here. This is magenta, is probably the most common word for that color. And I think that'll be enough to undo any of the green that happens in between these. So now that I've got all my colors on there, I'm going to hurry up and spread it around before it dries. Oh man, that's already on its way to drying right there. Now I want to get my red and yellow down here mixed together to the color that I want before I start moving my brush into the other colors, because then it'll be hard for me to come back down to that yellow without rinsing out my brush. So now I'm just going to keep going back and forth and gradually letting this brush push those colors together. your elbows down here and your arm pivots, it's natural to make brush strokes that are shaped like this. So I trained myself to make a slight smile shape, and then the result is that they end up level. So just a tip for making level lines is try to make a slight smile shape instead of trying to make level lines. So now you can see there's a very clear blue strip, pink strip, orange strip, but when this orange comes down and mixes into this, it's going to just turn gray, because with just the orange it would have turned slightly green, but now that I added that magenta to it, which is a little bit of a violet, that's the opposite of green, so it's not going to let it turn green, it'll only turn to a gray. Now I'm just smoothing out this color. You know, I can see a dark spot here. I'll just try to evenly distribute that. Now I want to go back down into my orange area, but what's going to happen is I'm going to get a lot of this darker bluer color in that if I go down too far. So I might need to rinse out my brush. Let's see. Yeah, it's not too bad. It's drying on me. It's drying so that this is hard to blend now, so it's getting kind of streaky. I'll rinse my brush. So now I've got a clean brush, and I will very quickly try to put my white and my yellow and my red in place and blend it up into the other color before it's too dry to blend. I think that what allows me to accomplish this is just having a lot of familiarity with the mixing so that I can move very quickly. I mean, it really is just that simple. I just move quickly in order to beat the dry time, but moving confidently helps me get it done faster. I'm not guessing what colors to use. I know from experience, so I'm able to make decisions very quickly and then just go straight to it. Okay, I like that sky. So now it goes smoothly from the blue to the lighter orange without changing to an unnatural looking green strip in the middle. If I hadn't put that magenta, then I would probably have something a little greener than what I want to see. Now, in all fairness, I have definitely seen skies that have somewhat of a greenish hue to them, but I don't want it to appear like that with it being kind of a strip right here in between. And now the horizon. For starters, I'm going to make a very simple grassy meadow that just goes off into the horizon, just disappears like the ocean. So I can use a gradient to make this a lot more three-dimensional, as I was saying. Just like the sky doesn't just look flat because it has a gradient. Also, I can have perspective on the ground that is just from the gradient. I don't even need shapes to have perspective. The gradient is the first thing that begins to develop perspective. First of all, I want my atmosphere affecting the far away grass. So I'm going to think that I'm working with a color that is a dull green. I don't want a real vivid green like in the last exercise. So down here, I'll just put some green on that represents the color of my plant, whatever it is, bushes, leaves, grass, whatever it is. So that color is going to get lighter and grayer because it's mixing with this orange. And so orange is not opposite of green, but it's still going to cause it to get a little bit more gray. If you have red, green, and blue representing the full spectrum, just like on your computer screen, the way you see these colors, they're all made with red, green, and blue. That's because those colors have the ability to simulate all of the other colors just by using them as primary. So an easy way to understand what an opposite is just to think of the opposite color as the colors that are left in that color wheel after you use the one you want. So if I'm using green, what's left is the red and the blue. That means that the opposite is violet. So this has red in it, but it doesn't have the blue. So it's not a complete opposite, but the red that's in this orange is going to cause the green to turn a little bit more gray. Now, to think of this in a not so technical way, the more different the color is, the grayer the result is. So this is not extremely different, but it's a little different, so I'm going to make it a little grayer. So black and white up here will give me a very quick gray. It's just a shortcut. And if I add a little bit of yellow to it, then it'll be a greenish gray. And I'm going to add a lot of white to that because I don't want my distant horizon to be very dark. I want it to look like it's very close in darkness to the atmosphere that it's buried in. I'm going to try to make a level line. Once again, if I try to make just a slight smile, it'll probably come out a straight line. Well, straighter line. I shouldn't credit myself with making a straight line. Now I want to see more and more of this color as I come down to the foreground because it's less atmosphere. That's one gradient. So now this gradient's going to get a little bit more complex because there's another element that is affecting this. So first of all, let me start putting this green in and establish my gray to green gradient. So this is my blue-yellow mix, or something close to it anyway. And it's grabbing a little bit of that black there, no big deal. It's probably just going to make it look more natural. Now when you have anything that has depth to it, like grass or leaves, things that are not just a flat surface, but they have shadows beneath where you can see into that surface, those shadows are a lot more visible when you're looking straight down. So that means down here at my feet, if I'm standing in this picture, that's where I want the black to be because that's where the shadows are. So my greenest area is not going to be back here because this has atmosphere covering it. It's not going to be down here because this has the shadows in it. My greenest area will be where my angle is more parallel to the ground. So I'm seeing the tops, but not the shadows that are beneath. But it's still close enough that the atmosphere is not making it gray. So anyway, if I want this to look a lot more three-dimensional, I want to include this concept of it getting more black, more shadowed as it comes closer. So yellow and blue right here. I'm going to grab a little bit of water because that's starting to get a little bit hard to blend. Okay, so now I'm going to put some black right down here. I'm going from my more black mix of green to my greener green, and then that green to my atmosphere green. So now let's see if I can bring that atmosphere down to that middle color. Now since I know how I mixed each of these colors, if it looks like it needs touch up after it dries, I'll be able to get at least a close match just by remixing any of the colors that are in this gradient. So you can see that the water in my brush pulled this off. So I'm working quickly. I put paint on it. It was barely dry. By the time I came back onto it, it wasn't dry enough to hold its place, so I actually wiped paint off of the canvas. That's what that is. So I'll let it dry, and then I'll just dry a little bit and then touch it up. Put a heavier load of paint, or just put more paint on. Maybe it just needs to be heavier. So now I've already painted a basic landscape by using gradients that achieve a very simple form of perspective. The gradient suggests that it's a surface that is more parallel to my line of vision, and that would be why as I move further into the background I see less of my shadow, and then I'm just seeing the tops, just the surface of my green grass or leaves or whatever, and then as it goes further, its atmosphere. The gradient causes the angle. And same with the sky. A gradient sky will look further away or just maybe deeper than a solid colored sky. For the same reason, it's a gradient. You can see that I already have a picture achieved. I could frame this and hang it on a wall, and I would enjoy looking at it, even though there's hardly any details in this, just because I've learned these rules from observing what happens in nature and used them in my picture to make it a believable picture of sky and a meadow. So now I want to put objects in there. So now I'm going to paint, for starters, maybe a few hills in here. Okay, I want you to remember this rule. Distance does not change an object's relationship to the horizon. So if this is the horizon looking out, and the horizon is simply just the furthest visible part of a flat surface that is parallel to my line of vision. It would have a horizon. So I'm going to put a tree in the foreground now. I've got a tree, and I've got kind of a 1/3 of the tree that's on top of the horizon, and I've got 2/3 that's below the horizon right here. Well, actually, you know, if I put some branches on this tree here, let's see. I'm gonna go like this, I'm gonna go like this, and you know, maybe now it's 50-50. So if I make this further, let's put another tree here. Now the distance has increased, but I'm not going to change the amount that's above the horizon versus the amount that's below the horizon. I'm going to keep that the same if this was the same sized tree. Okay, so now I've got my branches. I had, you know, the trunk was like a 1/3 ratio, so now I'm going to put my branches here. I'm going to put the top of the tree here. There we go. There's the same tree further away. Now I'm going to do the same tree further away. I'm going to put my trunk, and then I'm going to put my branches in here, and then I'm going to put the top. And it's kind of a 50-50 over and under the horizon. Now let's put some fence posts that are right here. I'm going to change the relationship to the horizon. So when I get up in here, I'm making them get further and further, and I'm going to make them start getting above the horizon. And now all of a sudden, this has kind of a weird high spot in the road back here that looks weird. And to make it even more obvious, here, let's do some trees on this side. I'm going to put a tree that is almost all the way above the horizon out here. Okay, so now we have what would be a really big tree if it's all the way up like that. And then I'm going to make it get closer like this. And then I'm going to make it get closer right here like this. And then closer, put another tree. You know, I'm definitely making it get smaller as it gets further away, but this is really affecting my perspective and my picture because I'm changing the relationship to the horizon each time I make this change distance. So to make my perspective look a lot more accurate, what I want to do is maintain that if this is 90% over the horizon, it means it's a very tall tree because this is eye level. Eye level is the horizon. That's where, when I'm looking at the horizon, my line of vision is completely parallel to the ground. And so it's going to intersect the tree right here, and that's going to be the height of my eyes. So then, that means that I'm only that tall. When I'm that far away, this is a very tall tree. So if I want that tree to come into the foreground, it's going to look a lot more natural if I go like this. And then if it's even closer, here, let's put another one back here. Let's put it kind of offset. It's in between. We'll put one right here. Then if I did one even closer that was way down here, well, that's definitely going to go all the way off the picture. You know, in paintings, it's a good thing to have some objects go all the way off the picture because that's a normal thing to see. You know, in our vision, when we're looking at nature, we don't just see every object fully in our field of view. We see objects all around and only the part we're looking at is visible. So you'll have just a branch coming in, just part of a trunk right here. So it's good in a picture to have things going all the way off, and it fits with this rule of perspective that an object's relationship to the horizon doesn't change with distance, but it does change with height. So if it goes up on top of a hill, that's what this road is looking like now. So if I do this, then this is going to look a lot more natural. This is now a road that's going over a hill. And so now my little fence posts are going to look a lot more natural because they're going up on top of a hill and then over again. So here, let's make the fence posts going off into the distance here. But now they're staying right here, right on the horizon as that road goes further and further away because the ground levels out back there. Let's make this hill come behind these trees. Now I'm just starting to have fun drawing this picture. Maybe make some wheel wells right here and an old fender. There. All right, let's move to the painting. So you make a hill in the background, right? You make a few hills. So you make them like this. And then you make hills in the foreground, and you want to see all your hills, so you make it a little bit lower. If these were the same sized hills, then since this is this far below the horizon, if I come up here, well, this one is similar to that ratio, except that now the amount of space left to the horizon is probably a lot less than a sixth of the hill. Now I get up to this one, well, now it's not even there. I mean, now it's a negative number because it's above the horizon. If I want these hills to look like they're generally similar in size and getting further and further away, then I want my horizon to stay above them always. So I'd make the hills go like this. I'd just make them come out here, and then to fix this picture, I would just bring the horizon up to here, make these hills go all the way to here, and bring that horizon up, so that then my hills are staying the same percentage below the horizon no matter how far they are. But it may be that I want some mountains in the background, so I can do that. And these would be above the horizon because they're just bigger sized hills. So awareness of what you're doing is the key. It's also important to recognize that the horizon indicates that at this height in the picture, my vision is parallel with the ground. And so that means that when I look straight, I'm high enough to see over the top of this hill now. So this is staged like I'm on top of a hill myself and can see over these tops. So let's say that I'm just having fun and throwing things together, trying to make a nice background for a house. Now you can see that the perspective on this house looks really weird in this picture. Because of these angles, a house, it is parallel with the earth. People don't like to build houses that are tilted. So because of that, these lines are parallel with my line of vision to the horizon, and on a level field, these lines would all be parallel, therefore vanishing to this same horizon. So I would want this house, in order to look normal, to be up at this height. I would want it up above the horizon. And so the problem that I run into is that in order to put this house way up here, the base of it is now level with my distant hills. So now this is either a giant house or this is a tiny hill. So if I staged this picture for this to look like my distant hills right here, and I am forced to put a house here, I don't have a place to put my house in the picture anymore. It doesn't fit anywhere. Down here the perspective is wrong. Up here the comparison is wrong. So in order to avoid running into conflicts that, you know, are definitely fixable but just force you to paint over things. I mean, if I want to put this house in the picture, I either have to make it tiny if I put it up here, or I have to put a new hill that comes up really high and paints over stuff that I might like in my picture in order to get it at the appropriate height. Or I need to change the perspective, which can be a difficult task. If you're working from a picture that's at one perspective, trying to change it into another one might be really hard. So to plan ahead and know what I'm getting into from the start, I just need to know that my eyes at the horizon are parallel with the earth, and anything that is above that horizon is above my eyes, and anything that is below that horizon, regardless of distance, is below my eyes. So with every single object I put into a picture, I'm just deciding where is it in relationship to my eyes. Is it above? Is it below? Do I have to turn my head and look up or look down? Now this is a pretty easy thing. If you just imagine a scene, you know, imagine yourself in a meadow and there's a big boulder and you have to look up to see it. Okay, that's above the horizon. If I put a big boulder, I'm going to put it above the horizon if I have to look up to see it. But now let's say that you're on a hilltop and you're looking at another distant hill, and as you look down the side of that distant hill, you can see the horizon above it because you're above that distant hill, and now there's a big boulder on that hill. Well, you don't have to turn your eyes up to look at it. You know, you can just picture where you have to look in order to see things. I find this to be a much easier task in a picture than trying to have, you know, calculate the size and distance that everything should be. I mean, that can be done, but it's easier just for me to imagine, is it above or below my eyes? And so I'm going to paint some hills in this picture. I don't need a house in this picture. I'm going to paint some hills and then just decide where they are in relationship to my eyes. Now, I kind of like the idea of being sort of up high on a hill. And so I'm going to put a hill right here in the foreground. And I'm going to say that this hill is, as I'm looking at it, only slightly above my eyes. So I'm going to do this. Slightly above the horizon equals slightly above my eyes. And I'm going to put yellow in that. This is Foreground Colors. I like to start with my foreground because if I'm trying to paint some scene that's in my imagination, usually whatever is in the foreground is what the scene is about. And so I'll start with my foreground and make my decisions about where things are before I get a background laid out in detail, because I don't want to waste my time doing something I'll have to paint over later, you know, if I change my mind. All right, I'm just making my green, same kind of green I made before, blue and yellow, a little bit of white, because I'm also going to add a little bit of black. I guess I didn't really need the white. I didn't add white to this bottom. Maybe there was some white in my brush, I don't know. Anyway, just a shade of green that's not too intense. I want it to look like kind of a natural green. So blue and yellow, and then I'll add a little bit of black, just like I did. And I'll put the black down here where I'm looking more straight into the shadows, less of it here. But this picture isn't about the details, so I'm just going to stay with big brush strokes and just have some fun getting a picture to look like it just has decent perspective. That's just going to be the main task of this exercise. Black down here, that's where the shadows are most visible. They're going to be less visible where the shape bends away from my eyes, so I'm not going to put the black up there on the edges of it. That's where I'm going to have my brighter greens. Now I'll just kind of go through wherever I see a long brush stroke, I kind of go across it to take away my bigger shapes, and then I just have this more randomized looking texture of brush strokes that leaves a lot of room for the imagination. Okay, how about another hill? All right, I'm thinking now it drops down into a valley and there's another hill that is below my eyes. I'm looking down at that hill. It's below my eyes because it's coming up out of a deep valley. And so below my eyes means below the horizon. I'm going to add more atmosphere to it, just like I did here. That's going to be, what was this? Black and white and yellow to get it to look like it has this orange color mixed to it. Okay, I've got a lot of that color still in my brush, so I'm just going to leave it at that. So just a little bit below the horizon means it's a little bit below my eyes, but then because of all of the atmosphere color I'm putting in it, that will determine how far away this hill looks. And so the further away I make it look, the bigger it must be. So I can make this look like a deep valley by putting it below the horizon and then adding distance. I can just add atmosphere to suggest the distance, and the distance affects the perception of the size of it. All right, now I'm thinking, let's make a tall hill, and that hill is going to be above the horizon because it's above my eyes. So I'm looking up at this one. I need to have more atmosphere color in this one, so white, black, yellow. Okay, let's make sure that it's got more of that light gray color than the hill that's in front of it. I want this to be further away. All right, I'll make some more back here. Now I'm going to get even further away, and these are going to be way out toward the horizon. And so this one is above my eyes because I made it above the horizon. Now I run into this problem all the time where this isn't very much lighter than this one here, but if I get too light, it's going to be even lighter than my atmosphere. So all I need to do is correct my values a little bit. I'm going to get a little bit darker on this one so that I have room to still have color on that one. Let's make this just a little bit darker. And I might have to make this one a little bit darker because of that. You know, sometimes this can be a back and forth process. A little bit more of that yellow and blue. Then I guess I'll just go a little bit darker on this one too. So that's more yellow to that guy. There we go. It's a little bit lighter than the one in front of it, but it leaves me room to still get lighter as I get further away. Darken that up just a little bit. You can see that I'm leaving the base a little bit lighter. It's just a fun little trick to always make it look like there's a kind of a haze in the valleys if you're doing that kind of a picture. I'm imagining a big mountain in the background. And so a big mountain needs to be way above the horizon, way above my eyes. If it's a real big mountain and I'm looking up, but it's far away. So, you know, you can decide. The more I make it the same color as the sky, the more distant it's going to appear. So I can do this by feel. If I need it to look bigger, but I don't have room on my canvas to go bigger, then I just make it more the color of the sky, and it'll look more distant, which will make you assume it must be bigger. All right, now I don't want to use quite as much. Maybe this is a little bit more rocky, so I'm going to try using just black and white, not so much green. I'm going to go very light. Now, this paint, when it's wet, is going to be equal in lightness to the sky. You see how that's equal in darkness to this right here, which means it's going to be a little bit darker when it dries. The only reason it needs to get lighter and lighter as it gets further away in this picture is because the atmosphere is the lightest thing. So what's going to make this mountain look big is that it's very close in color to the atmosphere. Okay, you can't see that now because it's wet, but when it dries, we'll see the silhouette of a distant mountain back there. And so now I'm going to go even darker still on these so that I can really bring them into the foreground. This is where it's somewhat of a delicate balance on values because I don't want to go as dark as the hills that are in front of it, but I want to make sure that I can see this in front of my mountain. All right, there we go. I'll just add a little bit more of this color down here. Oh, need a little bit more darkness on this one. There we go. All right, I need one more layer here. I never did finish that part. So now, maybe this could be my closest hill that I'm standing on. And so that one, if I'm standing on it, then it's below my eyes. It's okay to put that below the horizon because that is down by my feet. And so maybe I'm kind of looking down a hill into a valley. And because I'm imagining that stage that I'm up high and I'm looking down, I'm on the ground, and then the edge of that drops down. I know in my imagination that it's below my eyes when I'm looking perfectly level out to that horizon. That's why I have confidence in putting it here, knowing that this is consistent with what I'm imagining. That's the goal here, is to be able to accomplish what I'm imagining. Now I better make that a little bit darker than the one that's right here. I'm not sure if I can do that. I might have gone as dark as I can go. I think I can. See, that'll be darker. That'll dry real dark. Then put a little bit of black here that's by my feet. Then maybe get rid of my unnatural looking long brush strokes. I'm just going to go through and make smaller brush strokes on this. Now I think that this will look nice if I put a little bit of a fog in here. So if I want to do that, maybe I can just add gray. I'll do that just to separate these hills. That was just for fun. Let's go a little bit lighter. A little bit lighter on that fog. That looks kind of neat. Coming out of that valley right there. Another way to do this is adding the opposite color of green will also get me a gray. So that opposite color to green was this magenta right here. Sometimes that's easier. Just one color. You know, if you have that color in a can, it's easier just to take that one color and add it to your already mixed green to get gray. Just depends on your preference, the way you like to work, whether you want to mix, whether you want to put black and white in it, or whether you want to add an opposite color to get gray. You can do it either way. But it's fun knowing what you're doing and why it's going to work. You know, that's what this exercise is all about. There's nothing too special about painting a bunch of hills going off to a horizon. But it's fun. It's fun to paint it, and it's fun to paint it according to what you're imagining, rather than just guessing your way through the picture, wondering what it's going to look like when you're done. That can be fun too, but I guess for me, I've enjoyed gaining control. Okay, so in conclusion, I want you to be able to accomplish believable perspective on purpose without having to guess your way through it. So just remember that an object, if it doesn't change height, then it doesn't change its relationship with the horizon as it gets further away. So hills like this, if I want a lot of hills getting further and further and further toward the horizon, then if the first one is below the horizon, then the next one will also be below the horizon. And no matter how far away they get, they will always be below the horizon as they get tinier and tinier into just a little point when they disappear. Unless I want to change the height. In which case, it's easiest just to imagine if I need to look up or down. I imagine myself in that environment and I just say, okay, I'm looking straight at the horizon. Am I going to look up at this hill or am I going to look straight at it? And that is how I will paint it in relationship to the horizon. The horizon represents me looking straight, and so anything above it is me looking up at that object. Anything below the horizon is me looking down at that object. And by how much atmosphere I put, that is what determines the distance more than anything else. Not necessarily the size, because this is the same size as this. Look how these two hills are the same size. But this one looks so much further just because it has atmosphere. And then because it now looks so much further, yet the same size as this much closer hill, then you're left to assume, oh, that's a great big object. It's a great distance. So try this exercise. Imagine what you want and where, and then paint it with these rules in mind. Are you going to make a hill that is above your eyes or below your eyes? And how far do you want it to be? Add that much atmosphere to it.